fall. Now they're going to attack. See the canopy open? Check that out. You look real close, kids. You can see that guy waving at you. Ah, there we go. You know what they say, smoke them if you got them. Don't worry, it's biodegradable. It only kills mosquitoes.
Another round of applause for our Thunderbirds pilots. Keep that applause going, folks.
This is all electric powered, by the way. 4 big electric motors provide the push. Now, the Japanese Zeros are going to take off to simulate what their B-17 pilots experienced, not even knowing what kind of aircraft that was. So it looks like we're ready to roll out. Now, as you may have heard me earlier, this is the Japanese A6M0, and even by our veteran pilots, this thing was ferocious. It was light, fast, and nimble. And to keep the weight down, the Japanese did not add any armor plate, and the gas tanks were not resealable. So when a bullet went through the cockpit, obviously the pilot didn't make it, and when it went through the gas tank, it just ignited like a ball of flame.
The Mitsubishi A6M0 is a long-range fighter aircraft operated by the Imperial Japanese Navy from 1940 to 1945. When it was introduced early in World War II, the Zero was considered to be the most capable carrier-based fighter in the world, combining excellent maneuverability with long range. In early combat operations, the Zero gained a legendary reputation as a dogfighter, achieving the outstanding kill ratio of 12-1. Preliminary planning for an attack on Pearl Harbor had begun early in 1941 under the design of Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. On November 26, 1941, a Japanese task force of 6 aircraft carriers, including the Akagi, Kaga, Tsuryu, Kiryu, Shokaku, and Zuikaku, departed northern Japan en route to Hawaii, intending to launch its 408 aircraft to attack Pearl Harbor. The first wave was to be the primary attack, while the second wave was to attack carriers as its first objective and cruisers as its second, with battleships as the third target. The first wave carried weapons to attack ships, using specially adapted aerial torpedoes which were designed to operate in shallow water. Dive bombers were to attack ground targets, while fighters were ordered to strafe and destroy as many parked aircraft as possible to ensure they did not get into the air to intercept the bombers. The day after the attack, Roosevelt delivered his famous infamy speech to a joint session of Congress, calling for a formal declaration of war on the Empire of Japan.
1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
Today, 75 years later, most of the witnesses of the attack are no longer with us. But the legacy of the men and women who defended Pearl Harbor on that day of infamy will always remain. It was a day that defined America, and sacrifice and valor were demonstrated by American heroes at unprecedented levels, and foreshadowed the trials, toughness, and grit that defined the greatest generation during the Second World War. 15 Medals of Honor were awarded as a result of the attack, along with 51 Navy Crosses raining down from the second wave of Japanese attackers. They reached speeds of 100 miles per hour during the dangerous race to the airfield. Once airborne, these brave soldiers were ordered to patrol before returning to the airfield for more fuel and ammunition. One of Welch's machine guns had jammed, and Taylor had been wounded in the arm and the leg. He was advised not to get back in the air that day, but nevertheless the two pilots reloaded and climbed back into the sky. Once he got the zero in his sights, he unloaded his guns with the wrath of America. The enemy plane burst into flames and crashed, allowing Taylor to escape. Welch then followed the other plane fleeing out to sea. He caught it 5 miles offshore and sent its 2-man crew to an ocean grave. Though vastly outnumbered by Japanese bombers in the skies over Oahu, Welch and Taylor shot down at least 6 enemy planes and damaged several more.
With confidence in our armed forces, with the unbounding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God.
For despite the advantage of surprise taken by the Japanese planes and submarines, the resilient and courageous American servicemen at Pearl Harbor still destroyed 29 aircraft, damaged 29 others, and sunk or beached 5 mini-subs. 6 of the American battleships that were sunk or damaged during the attack were restored, refloated, and returned to service. Survivors who were physically able to continue their service fought on with courageous resolve to defend our freedom for the rest of the war. For the United States, Pearl Harbor marked the beginning of a war. For Japan, it was the beginning of the end. And for the Pearl Harbor heroes of 75 years ago, we shall always be grateful for their courage and sacrifice. Though we were badly damaged in the surprise attack, a handful of American pilots put up a spirited defense against the Japanese and became some of the first American heroes of World War II.
And actors.
Unbelievable job. Unbelievable. And everything ran. And now, from the right, nice and low, right on the money. Here we go, crossing the threshold, as the military jargon, we are committed, gear down and locked. And check that out. That's what we call a grease job, and he's on the deck. Now the pilots, when they land this aircraft, will keep the fan spooled up, because the turbofan will not spool up as fast as a full turbine. Just in case they have a missed approach, they're able to get it back off the runway. And it's got a wing like a Cessna, and very few pilots are actually washed out of flight school. But they do take a considerable amount of G-load because of their tight maneuvers on the ground. And the gun that they fire is firing uranium-depleted shells. And the reason they're using uranium-depleted shells is to get rid of the depleted uranium, but it's heavier than lead, and it'll pierce the side of an armored tank much easier than the lead shell. The cartridges are injected in a canister behind the pilot, because if they were injected in the airstream, obviously the turbofans would gather them up, and that would end the flight pretty fast. So the A-10 Thunderbolt. This is Joe McBride at the controls of Thunderbird. The maneuvers he's flying are very prototypical of the full-size Thunderbolt. Pounds of fuel. These engines are burning it up at a pretty fast rate, so the dual engines between them are putting out pretty close to 65 pounds of thrust. Check this out, knife edge pass. And he's watching it. In model and real life of extremely low speeds. Look at that. That's beautiful. Joe McBride with the A-10 Thunderbolt, fondly referred